So what we would do is, so I would use a for loop, and what we would do is we would set the value of I to be 99. So we're going to start it at 99, and then we will loop while I is greater than 0, and each time I iterates, we're going to minus. So we'll go 99, 98, etc., etc., etc. So then what we have to do here is we have to print out our message. We have to concatenate variables with string literals. So the first thing we'll say is the first part of the line is 99 bottles, right? So we'll say I, which is, yeah, so plus, and then we'll say bottles of beer on the wall, plus I again, right? 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Then what do we have to do? Yeah, then we'll put in brackets. We can say I minus 1. So take it around, pass it around. 1. I take it around, pass it around. Bottles of beer on the wall. Okay, let's try it. There we go. So let's do one thing. We'll put on a line break at the end just so that it goes on a new line every time. Okay? Which one? Here? This line? So this line is just, it's concatenating the values of our variables with the string literals that are the message. So each time it goes through the loop, it's going to look at the value of I. So the first time the value is 99, so it prints out 99, and then it prints out this string, right? Then it adds this on, because that's also 99, and then take one down, pass it around. Then 99 minus 1 is 98, so it's going to print out 98, and then bottles of beer on the wall. So here, let's add in some spaces here. We'll add a space here, and a space here, and a space here, and a space here. Oops. Here and here. Okay. And now it's a little better. Okay? And then we could have, see down here, this doesn't really make sense. Take one down, pass it around, 1 bottles of beer on the wall. So we could have an if statement that says if bottles is less than 1 or something, or 2, then only don't print out the yes. Okay, but we don't have too much time today. Yep. Okay, well let's look at it in the lab. When we're done with the lecture, so if you guys have any problems, if you didn't get that in time, or you have any problems with last week's lab, we can take a look in the lab. Okay, so what I want to do now is what do we want to do? I want to, okay, we didn't really get into forms last week, which was, I did that somewhat on purpose, but essentially we have about 50 minutes left. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the intersection between HTML forms and JavaScript. Okay? So the first thing is we'll take one step back in that now we have to look at forms now in HTML. Okay? So the first thing that we need to do when we have a form, so we're going to put a form in, let's say in our section here, underneath our paragraph. Okay? So the first thing we need to do is create a form using the form tags. Okay? And if we look at that in our page, there's not going to be anything there yet. It's just empty yet. Okay? So also let's go into our JavaScript and let's comment out our bottles of beer for now so that we can see. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do in our form is we're going to add a couple of elements. Okay? So usually the main type of element that we use is a text input box. Okay? So we're going to have an input field, and the type is going to be text. Okay, and we're also going to give it, well, for now we're not going to give it anything. We're going to close that, and then we'll put a line break after. Okay, and also we're gonna copy this and put 2 input boxes here. Okay, so now if we refresh, now we should actually see something. Look, now we have some input boxes. Okay, pretty straightforward. So let's add in a label. So first, let's make this the first name, and let's make this, we'll make this 2, and make this last name. Okay, so now when we refresh, now we have this. Okay, and let's add in one more. Actually, let's change this to, instead of first name, let's make this username, and we'll make this one password. Now, when we have a password, we need to make it a special type. So not just text, we make it type password. Why do we do that? Because then when we go here, yeah, then people can't see and peek on your password. Okay. So the last thing we need. So there are other. We'll look at this in a bit later. But there are text checkboxes, radio buttons, and other form elements. But for now, and drop down combo boxes and things. But for now, we'll just stick with text. But the last thing we need is input type equals submit. Okay, and that will we'll give it a value, and that's going to give our form a button, and we'll call this submit. Okay, so now we have a form and a button. So when you click submit, the stuff should disappear. Okay, but so like I said, this form is pretty useless just without JavaScript. What can we do? Nothing really. Okay, so let's look at some examples of how we can process this data with form. How we can use JavaScript to check the value, for example, of the text boxes, and then we can do things. We could like log people in, or tell people that their username is incorrect, or things like that. Okay. Okay. So let's see. So the first thing that we need to do is we need some way to. So there are a couple of ways to do this, but we need some way to hook in to. So when we click this button, we need some JavaScript to run. Okay? So one thing we didn't talk about in JavaScript, and we'll talk about that right now, are functions. Okay? So functions, if you've done programming before, you know that functions are just a group of commands, right? That you label. And then you can then recall those commands later by just referring to that label. Okay? So the way we create, there are a couple of ways of creating functions in JavaScript. You can do something called anonymous functions, which generally I don't like, but there are times when it's suitable to use anonymous functions. But let's use name functions for now. So what we do is we use the keyword function, and then we'll give a function label like validate form. Okay? So this means that any code between these brackets will be run if and only if this function is called somewhere. Okay? So if I do this alert and I say hello world, okay? Will hello world appear if I refresh? Will it? No. Because I've defined the function, but I haven't called it. But now if I do this validate form, now will it come? Yes. Okay? Because we've defined and called it. So now what we can, now that we're using JavaScript, we can use some of the debugging tools. Okay? So I might have showed you this last week, but Chrome has debugging tools built in. Right? So if we click on here on this menu and we go to Tools and we go to JavaScript Console, You will need to use this. So what we can do is we can debug our code and step through. So if we go to sources and then we go to our JS file here, and what we'll do is we'll, on this alert here, we will click on the 3 and that creates a breakpoint. Okay, and also here on validate form we'll also put a breakpoint. So now when we run our code, see how it skipped over this, but it froze here on 6. So now if I click step into the function, so it's going to go in the function now. See, we've jumped up to here now, and this is where it is. And now if I go just run, now it runs my hello world. Okay, so you can debug JavaScript just like any, like C# or Java or anything. Okay, so make sure if you have problems, the first thing you should do before you ask for my help or your neighbor's help or go to Google, first thing you should do is go here and go to Tools, JavaScript Console, and then click on the console. And if there are any errors, like let's make a syntax error. Let's do this. Okay. So now let's go back here and run this. And we'll run it. Oh, look, we got it didn't work. And look, right here it says there's an error. Validate form is not defined. And then it even tells you where the error is. Okay? So always make sure you check the console, because it'll tell you. It'll give you your answers. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the value of our form data. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our form, and we're going to change here. We're going to add a few things to our form. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to say on submit, we're going to give it a function name. We're going to say return validate form. Okay, so what that means now is when you click submit, it's going to run our function. Okay, so let's try it here. Okay, so we have to take out validate form, and so now if we refresh this and remove this, okay, and now if we click this button, now the function, now it comes up. Because we've clicked it, we've submitted it, and what we've said is we've said, on the submit of this form, do this, run this function. Okay? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the values of what's in these text boxes. Okay? And there's a couple of ways to do that. So what we'll do is we're going to use the document object model. Okay? In order to using JavaScript, we can access all of the elements in our document. We can set and get the values of elements in our form. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to in our form we're going to get rid of our hello world. Okay, and we're going to create a variable, and we're going to call it var first name, because we always name our variables something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get the value of whatever is here, or username. We'll call it username because we're going to get the value here. Okay? So we'll say var username. Okay? And then we're going to say, so the username is going to equal the document, but not the whole document. It's going to equal the forms of our document. So of all the forms in our document, we want to get, we're going to get one called, and we haven't given it a name. So let's go back, and our form, we'll give it a name. We'll call it login form. Okay? And then we'll go to JavaScript, and so now here we'll say login form. So that's going to access our form. Then within our form now, we have to access one layer down. We have to access our field element. And what did we call our field? We didn't call it anything yet. So what we're going to do, we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call it username. Okay? So our input here is going to be called username. And here we're going to say username. Okay? And then we have one more thing to do, which is then we have to say I want the value. Okay? And then finally our semicolon. Whoops. Okay. So we'll save that. And why doesn't it like that? Let's try it. Unexpected token. Oh. So, sorry, not dot. It's just a bracket right away. Okay, so we'll save. And so that should go away now. But still, nothing's going to appear. So, now what we can do is let's do this. Let's alert the username just to make sure that everything's working. So let's go back here. We'll refresh. And I'll put in a bunch of text. And let's click the button. There we go. Look at that. Okay. Now we're starting to do something. Okay. So now instead of remember I said alert boxes are not good. I always just use alert boxes. Like so, you notice how I'm testing things at every stage, right? So I hooked up a JavaScript file and then I used an alert box to test to make sure it's working, and then I just used an alert box to make sure that the value is like this is working correctly, right? So that's really what I use alert boxes for. It's just testing, okay? But so now what we want to do is, well, let's keep the alert here. But let's say our website has a rule that usernames must be 8 characters or more. Okay? How would we do that now using what we know about JavaScript? A loop? Well, we wouldn't need a loop.
If condition?
Yeah, we need an if statement. Okay? So the value coming off here, that's a string. Okay? So username is going to be a string. So what we could say is if username dot length, so that's going to return the length of whatever the text is. If username dot length is less than 8, then what do we want to do? We'll say let's have an alert box for now. We'll get rid of it and change it with something better. We'll say too short, and then we could say another one. We'll say else, and we'll just display the alert. So let's try that. Okay? So now, I'll put in just 4 characters. Too short. Okay? But now let's put in more. Now it's good. Okay? But so now, instead of the alert boxes, let's do something else. Let's, what we want to do is we want to change the value of an element. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our HTML, okay, and underneath our username, we're going to put a paragraph, okay, and we're going to give it an ID, and we're going to call it username message. Okay, see what I did right there? This is called camel casing, right? So you can string together words almost in a sentence, and all you do is the first word is all lowercase, and then each word has an uppercase. Okay, that's camel case. That's how I usually that's like, see this? Same thing. Okay, that's a good habit for you guys to get into, camel case. Okay. So now what we want to do is, okay, so if we do this and we go back here, there's just going to be a little space there. Okay, that's fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to JavaScript, and instead we're going to get rid of these alert boxes, because remember, alert boxes are not good. We don't like alert boxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, similar to the way we did this to get a value, we're going to use what's called the DOM to set a value. Okay? So we're going to say document dot get element by ID. So we're going to get an element by its ID. And so remember, what was the ID? I set this. So I gave it username message. So I'm going to pass that into here. Okay? Then we'll set the value. Okay? And we're going to give it a message. So we'll say, sorry, usernames must be 8 characters or more. Okay? Let's see it. Let's see what happens. Okay, why didn't it work? Oh no, that's a text field. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong example. We need to set the inner HTML. Sorry, 1 second here. So what instead of instead of value, we set inner HTML. Okay? Sometimes it's a little bit different depending on the element that you're trying to write to. Okay? So now let's try it. Oops. Why did it go away? Oh, are we writing to the document still? Why would that go away? Oh, return true. And I'll explain this in a second. I think we need to return true. No, maybe it's false. Why is that going away? Okay, that's it. So, what's happening here is, so when you click the button, right, the button is of type submit. So when you submit a form, it's more than just clicking on the button. What it's doing is it's actually trying to load another page. Because the next step, what we're going to learn in about 3 or 4 weeks, no, maybe soon, in the near future, we're going to learn server-side stuff. So what happens is when you submit a form, it submits that data to another file. And that file would be a server-side script, which would take the form data and then do stuff with it. So what we've done here is, because we've put on submit return validate form. So are you guys familiar with what it means when a function returns a value? Do you understand what that means? Right? So let's say you have a value. Oh, we can do it here. Let's say we have a method like this, represented by our box. And this is add 2 numbers. Okay? And let's say the first thing that comes in is the first number, the second thing that comes in is the second number, and what comes out is the addition. So we could have, let's say, 2 and 2 and 4. So 4 in this case is the return value. Why isn't that staying? Okay? So it's taking in 2 attributes, it's doing some stuff, and it's returning a value. Okay? You can return numbers, Boolean statements. It's basically it's the result of the function. So if the result of the function is false, then the form won't actually submit. It stops it from submitting to the next file. Okay? So what was happening, the reason why it was refreshing is because I was returning true, which was submitting the file, and then basically it was reloading the file, so it would disappear again. But because we've said return false, that stops the submission. It stops the form from submitting in its tracks. Okay? And so the reason we would do that is because we do form validation with JavaScript first. Okay? Because then if the form is invalid, we don't want to waste the server's time with invalid data. So we validate it first with JavaScript and then hand it off to the server. Okay? So, so let's style this a bit better. So how would we, let's style our form so that let's space a little bit better. So let's, what did we do before? Margin. Let's make the form have a margin of 20 pixels. Okay. There we go. And let's also, so that our message is salient so people can see it, let's make, so we'll make it a, we can have an ID and a class. This is a good example of how you would have an element with an ID and a class. So let's set the class to be class warning message. Okay, because we want all warning messages, we're going to make them all red. Okay, so let's go back to CSS. And so we're going to say class warning message, and we're going to change the color to be red. So now, if I click here, sorry, usernames must be, now it's red. Okay? So now let's do a couple of more rules. Let's say this. Let's say, so let's do the first one. So if username dot length, let's say this. If user, I think it's either null or nil. So if username equals null, so let's see, is that going to work? Because we want to know the case when, because let's say if we refresh and I do this, oh, I guess it picks up the 0, 1. Okay, that's fine then. We don't need this. But what's another? Let's see. What's another easy thing we could check for? Well. Okay, but that's going to be, because then we have to start checking for characters and things, and that's going to be, I think we might start that, we might do that next week.
Like, there must be an uppercase letter in the password.
Again, we'd have to check through the characters. It's not too hard to do, but maybe we'll get into that next week. What's that? It's not, what in the username? Oh, digit. Yeah, that's... Let's, if we have time, we'll come back to that. We only have about 25 minutes left today, and I want to do a couple of more things. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the password. So how would we do that, right? So we would, basically we could copy this. We'll copy this line, and then we'll change this to password, and this to password, and we have to go back and change this, so we'll put a name in here, name equals password, okay, and then we'll also add a warning message underneath, so we'll call this password message, okay, and sorry? No, not necessarily, because we use the same class. So now what we want to do is we want to go back to JavaScript, and so now we have the password here, and now we'll say if password.length is less than 8, then we'll do this. We'll copy this line, but I have to change this to be password message. I need a string there. Okay. And we'll change this to password. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if we let's put this here. This should be here. So if it's in here, return false. Actually, no. What we'll do is we're going to create a variable called problem, and we'll set it to be false. Okay? So if it gets in any of these, so if it gets here, then there's a problem. So we'll set it to be equal true. Okay? Same if it's here. If it gets here, there's also a problem. We'll set it to equal true. Okay? And then finally, we'll say if problem equals true, then return false, else return true. Okay? So what will happen if there's a problem with the form, it won't submit, it freezes. You see how it didn't refresh? But if everything in the form is okay, it returns true and it tries to submit the form. But we haven't given it another file, so it just refreshes this file. Okay? But because whenever there's a problem, it'll freeze and it won't, even if there's only one problem, it won't do anything. Okay? So let's do this. So look, notice now, even though I've fixed my password, it's long, it doesn't fix it. The message is still there.
Because of username,
No, because I have to explicitly set that to be nothing. So the other thing I could do is do this. We could say, so else, because we have an if, so then we would do this. So if username is less than 8, print the message. Otherwise, print just nothing. We'll make the inner HTML blank. And the same thing for this. So we have to add an else. Okay? And then we'll just make this blank. See? Okay. Okay. So let's see. Well, I think we have time then to validate, to look at more validation. So let's look at validating. Let's see. We can check to make sure there is. Let's see. What could we do? It's not too difficult. Okay, let's add one more field. Let's add in email. Okay, so we'll copy all this in. We'll paste this here. Okay, and let's get rid of our line breaks. You really shouldn't be using line breaks. Okay, and then this will change to email, and the name will change to email. And this will change to email as well. Okay? So now we have a new form field. Okay? And so now what we'll do is we have to go to JavaScript. Okay? And at the top here, we'll copy this again. So we'll change this to email and this to email. Okay? And now what we can do is so we'll do another check. We'll down here we'll say if email. Oh, did we change the value? Yeah. If email. Well, what we'll say is we'll say variable position, and we'll say email dot index of, and we'll use the @ symbol. Okay, and so that will give us the it'll give us a number to see if there's an @ symbol in our email address. Okay, so actually what we'll do is we'll say, let's do this. No, we'll leave it. I think that should be okay. So we'll leave it there, and for now let's just alert our position to see what happens. Again, I like to use alert boxes to debug. So we'll go back here. And I'll put in like cbrandj@hotmail. So let's submit, and it says 7. So that's because it's at the 7th character. But let's do this now. -1. Okay, that's not good. So what we can do now is we'll say if position dot if position is less than 0, then what do we want to do? We're going to have a message. Okay, so in here we're going to say email message, say sorry, your email is not properly formatted. Okay? There we go. But if we have this in here, it should, so we have to do an else. So we'll say else, and then we'll do this again. We'll copy this, and we'll make this just nothing. Oops. Okay. Now that's still not a valid email address. So what could we do? So what's another part of that we always need in an email address? Well, but yeah, but that's, so what part of that is always consistent? Well, the dot. There's the dot. We have an @ and the dot. And what is always consistent about the @ and the dot? The dot comes after the @.
Yes.
So what is that? How would we do that in our code? How would we check for that? But how do we? Because what is index of? What does that give us?
You have to put conditions like after we will have to Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail.
No, but what if it's at my centennial or something? You know. So, we could use regular expressions. We'll look at that next week. But for now, well, what we can do is, because remember, index of gives the position. So if the position number, so if the dot is after the @, then it should be greater than, right? So here we could say this. So if there's no @ symbol, then we'll say problem equals true. Okay. So if there is no @ symbol, but if there is an @ symbol, then we'll do the next check, which is check for a decimal, our dot. So we'll say if, so we're in nesting an if statement now. So now we're saying if, what are we, no, so in here we're going to say position equals email.index of dot. Okay? And we'll say, first of all, we'll say if position is greater than 0, okay, and oh wait, no, we're going to do this, dot position, because we don't want to override the last one. So we're going to say if dot position is greater than 0 and dot position is greater than position, right? Because that means it's after. Then and only then is the email properly formatted. Okay? Otherwise, problem equals true. Has to be here. Okay? And no, wait. Else. Okay. So let's try it. Okay, so it's not working properly. So let's debug it. So let's go here. Let's go to our tools. Let's go to JavaScript console. And let's go to sources. And we will click here. And now let's run it. So we'll drop this down, we will go into here, and we will click submit. Okay, so here's our form. So it checks the username. So okay, so the username length was too short, so there's a problem. Okay. Then it checks the password length. Okay, there's also a problem there. Then it goes here, gets the position of email. Okay. We can then inspect, so the value of position is 7. Okay, so it goes down. That's fine. So now we're going to get the value of the dot. And so that's -1. And so, oh, so we just need to print the message. We just forgot to print the message when there's a problem. So we'll say, we'll just copy this. And save. Okay, now let's refresh. And we'll get rid of our breakpoint. And we'll close this. And we'll refresh. Okay, so no problem there, but now let's do this. Now we have a problem. Let's put this back in and do this. Now we also have a problem. And now we'll fix it. Now we don't have a problem. And we'll fix this. Now we don't have a problem. And now we'll fix this. And we're good. Okay? So any questions so far, guys, about the conditions here? Okay. So what we're doing is, so first we get the values, right? We're pulling the values from the form. So this is all, and now we're storing them in variables because we don't want to have to reference this big long thing all the time, right? So we've stored the value in these nicely named variables. Then we go in here. So we start off assuming that there's no problem with the form. It's fine. The form is all good. So we do the first check. So we check the value of username. We check how long it is. So this will return a number between however long it is. So if it's 8, then it'll be false and it won't go in here. And instead it'll go in this block, which blanks out the error message. If it's less than 8, it will go in here. It'll print the error message, and then it will switch this variable to be true, because now we have a problem. It only takes one problem, and now we don't want to submit the form. So now that's it. Okay? And we could even return here, but we want all the error messages to print, not just the first one. So then we go to the next one. We do the same thing with the password. We check, is it the length okay? If it's not, we print out a message and set this variable to be true because there's a problem. If it's greater, or if it's greater than 8, then there'll be no problem, and it will blank out the message. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Good call. Then the next one here is we're getting the position of the @ character in the email variable. So that'll return into here, position. So in cbranje@gmail, it was the 7th position. So if it's less than 0, which means it didn't find it, there's a problem. So we go in here again. Now we keep resetting the problem because if these were all fine, we need to set it here. Okay. Then we do. So if we found an @ symbol, then okay, that's fine. But now we have to check to see if there's a dot and if the dot is after the @ symbol. Okay? If it is, then that's fine. And if it's not, then we set the problem and we set the message. Okay? Okay. And then this. So if there's a problem, we return false, which stops the form from being submitted. And if there wasn't any problem, then it's true and submit true. Okay.
All the same works for different kinds of user ID and passwords. Suppose for an application we have n number of users, privileges and passwords. How are we going to do this?
Well, it would be specific to to your case, whatever you're trying to do. Right? But this is, I'm just trying to show you sort of a general example. But, you know, we're setting the value of elements. So you could set it to be anything. Right? We're just dealing with values. The values can be anything. Right? It can be from anywhere, from a disk, from a database, from the user. It's all the same to the computer.
What kind of user they are getting the value from database, right?
Not right now. It's just we're still dealing with client side. Soon we will get into database. We'll connect with our database, and we'll create an actual login system. Okay? Okay, so for your assignment this week, what I want you to do is to augment your trading card so include a form with one text element and a button that allows the user to change a part of your card. So for example, they should maybe allow them to change the name or the position. Okay? So your card should have a form, just one form, and a button. And so if someone, let's say I put in Carmen and I press my button, then your name should go away, and that the person's name that they put in should be inserted. Okay, pretty simple. You should be able to do that in less than an hour. Okay? Okay. And I'll be here to help if you guys need a hand. Okay?
Like in the username?
Sorry?
Like in the username?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you can use this stuff we did today as there's lines in there.
When we click in the submit button, the username is,
Yeah, so for example here, let me show you an example of one of your classmates' submissions today. This one here. That's good. Right, so what you could do is you could put a form either inside the card, or you could have a form underneath here. And then when you click go, maybe, and then maybe go ahead, maybe have one for name, one for position, or one for first name, one for last name, one for position. Or maybe if you really want to look forward, maybe see if you can change the image. We didn't really learn how to do that today.
change the name.
Well, you would have to. We didn't learn it, but it wouldn't be that hard to look up to see how to do that. Okay? But at the bare minimum, you have to change some text. Okay? Okay? Okay. So let me know if you're having troubles with that. Okay, or if you had troubles with last week's assignment. Okay? Okay.